All right, well, our attendees are actually just rolling in, so I'm going to go ahead and do a quick intro before we get started. Thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar, Content Strategy 101 with the Pixo team. Before I hand it over to Lindsey and Jenna, just a few quick things. You will receive a follow-up email later today with a recording of today's session. So if there's something you missed or some information you want to revisit, you will have access to do that. You are also welcome to ask questions. We just ask that you submit those via the chat box. Your microphones and cameras will remain off throughout the session, but we'll address those in the chat throughout the session. And also once Lindsey is done with her presentation, we can do a little Q&A session before our hour is up here today. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to the Pixo team and we'll get started.
Thanks, Jordan. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Jenna. I'm the lead account coordinator at Pixo. If you haven't met us yet or you don't know Pixo, we are a software consultancy in Champaign-Urbana. We create custom websites, software, applications. We address unique challenges. We work in a variety of industries as well. So we work with all sorts of folks. We're going to share a lot of information today. Well, Lindsey's going to share a lot of information today. It may spark questions. As Jordan mentioned, you're welcome to share those in the chat. We love questions, so please don't be shy about that. If anything does come through to the chat that feels like I can gracefully interrupt Lindsey, I will, and she will address it in real time for you, but I'll be the judge of that. And we also have a few links that we'll be sharing throughout the presentation, so keep your eye on the chat for those. And everything will be shared afterwards. So if you want to just sit back and watch, you're welcome to do that and just absorb and receive everything afterwards. So I think that's all. Lindsey, are you ready to go?
I am ready to go, Jenna.
Okay, let's do it. Go for it.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today on this extremely gloomy morning in Champaign-Urbana, wherever you are. But here in this webinar, it's nice and cozy and warm and bright. So I'm glad we could be here today. This session is titled Content Strategy 101, a do-it-yourself guide to finding your focus. As Jenna mentioned, Pixo is a web and software company. We are woman-owned. We create apps, websites, and software. Our slogan is that put people first. Pixo has been doing that for more than 20 years, and I've been doing that at Pixo for coming up on 9 years, which is bonkers, cuckoo bananas. So all that to say, we at Pixo and I at Pixo have some experience and perspective on this. My title is Content Strategist. I'm a content strategist at Pixo. I work mainly on complex informational websites. And so what putting people first means in that context is that this kind of work doesn't happen in a vacuum. We at Pixo know that it's worth it to take the time to engage people in this process, people who will be using the site to share information, and the people who will be visiting the site to get information. So that's kind of the central focus of all of this, what you'll be hearing today, content strategy. All right, let's see if I can get my slide. Yes, I can. Okay, in general, I'll be encouraging you to focus on what matters and ignore what really doesn't. It's really easy when you're working on websites, especially if you've spent some time in that website, you're familiar with the content, to get a little tunnel vision and get caught up in certain anxieties that really just don't matter that much. And sometimes, depending, on what kind of website you're working on, mostly these are things that matter most to your boss or the dean of your college, whatever your situation is, than your audience is. Meanwhile, the principles of content strategy, which if you're unfamiliar with content strategy or have only heard it as sort of, a buzzword or a phrase, it's really just being thoughtful about what information goes on your site, how it gets there, how it's organized and labeled. And the principles of content strategy pretty much don't change, and they're pretty much common sense. So let's talk about what does matter, shall we? Your audience. Your audience matters most of all. To give your visitors the information they need, you need to know who your visitors are. Your content is not for you. This has been my motto. I should have a flag behind me that says this. Probably literally every presentation I have ever given in those almost 9 years at Pixo, I have said this phrase: your content is not for you. But whom is it for? You need to know this. If you know only one thing about your website, one guiding principle, it should be this: who are you trying to reach? Who needs this website? And if in the back of your head, you're like, well, our site is kind of for everyone. No, wrong answer. A site for everyone is essentially a site for no one. It takes some tailoring to get your message there and reach the people you're hoping to reach. So my first tip for you is to find your audience. And we'll walk you through a few steps to sort of get closer to that if you really have no idea. Or if you haven't done this in a while, it's always worthwhile to go through this exercise again. First of all, brainstorm every possible group who might need your site. Just make a big list. Get a group of relevant stakeholders together if you can, or if this applies to you. Think about people who update your website and people who work with the people you're trying to reach. Remember, people. If you work for the university or for a school, higher ed, think about people who work in recruitment, who interact with students, who answer the phones, who answer questions. If you are, I don't know, a business, well, you're probably all a business. If you're a store, a retail space, who are your customers, who interacts with your customers the most? If you can, get a group together and think in big categories like this. So this is an example for a higher ed site, but this is a pretty broad swath of groups here that we're thinking about. We have the more obvious ones like prospective students, alumni, probably current students, and then people like the media, maybe the media comes to our site. We're not sure. We hope they do. Collaborators in research, et cetera, et cetera. Some of these groups are, of course, more relevant than others, but it's good to just get them all out at the beginning. Go broad. And then ask these kinds of questions to help you prioritize. Who depends on the website specifically? Meaning some of these groups will already be connected to you. You will have other channels of communication open to certain groups, like personal connections, email lists, newsletters. Current students, they come to class, so they get information just from being in the space. Do they go to class anymore? I actually don't know or they just do it on Zoom. I think they go to class. So what groups need the website specifically for us to communicate with them? They rely on the website most to get that information from us. And what groups are most important to our business goals? So great content is the center of a Venn diagram. I don't have a slide for this. Just imagine, here's a circle, Venn diagram. In one circle is your audience's needs, what they need from your website, what information and actions they're looking for when they come to your website. And then the other circle is your organizational goals. This could be your strategic plan, your business goals, whatever keeps the doors open, as they say, for your organization. Great content feeds both of those. It sits right in the middle of that Venn diagram. So think about what groups are most important to you reaching your business goals as well. When you're thinking about these groups, I also should say these could be groups that go to your website, and it could be more aspirational. We would really like to reach more of this type of group. Then prioritize that list based on who needs the site most and who contributes to your goals. This is sort of a spoiler alert for any higher ed site. We work on a lot of higher ed sites, so this list comes pretty naturally. I've never worked on a site for a school or a college or a higher ed unit that didn't have prospective students as its number one group, because prospective students are really reliant on the website. A lot of times they could just be Googling. They don't know anything about the school. They're just Googling it to see what kind of programs there are. They're not already connected in other ways to be getting that information. And also they're pretty important to the business goals because you need students to keep the doors open. Alumni, donors, prospective faculty and staff. So prioritize your list based on the information that you came up with during that type of exercise. And then, actually, I'm not gonna, don't read that yet. And then for each of these groups, and I would say 4, maybe 5, I might put the cap on 5 groups to prioritize. You can only prioritize so many groups at one time. So for each group that you're prioritizing, put yourself in their shoes and brainstorm questions that they have when they come to your site that they're hoping to answer. So you don't have to just pull this out of thin air, but you can use common sense and also ask yourself, what questions does this group ask in real life, over email, in visits, on phone calls, in person? What do they need to learn on the site? What type of information are they looking for? And what do they need to do on your site? Actions like apply for something, apply for a program, schedule a visit, connecting with you in a tangible way. You can't hear because the AirPods are, I'm clicking my nails together. They're connecting with you with these actions, information and actions they want to take on your site. And also think about what kind of information you might have that these groups might not know they need. That can be a little bit trickier, but same as the aspirational, the aspirational groups, we're hoping to reach more of this type of group. And also they might not know that they want this kind of information, but we think that's really valuable for them. So for instance, for prospective students, for a school, they might be coming to your site, looking at a program and thinking, is this program right for me? How do I apply to this program? What kind of jobs can I get after graduation? Mommy and daddy are looking over my shoulder. How do I get employed? Things like that. So put yourself in their shoes. Okay, also take stock of your current content. This is this can be a less fun one. I'll just say, taking stock of your current content can be really painstaking. If you're here because your website is not really serving your needs, you might be a little overwhelmed. Websites present a host of problems. That's kind of a pun. So this can be painstaking, but it's absolutely worth it. If you're thinking about putting any real effort into improving the content on your site, you need to start with what you have. Much like before you make a grocery list, you look in the fridge to see what you have. And you ask yourself, okay, what's still fresh? What recipes am I hoping to make this week? What should I be eating soon? Like it's starting to look a little bit fuzzy. What should I be throwing away entirely? I also want to say, just for funsies, we've been using this image for this type of metaphor for years. And I just really looked at it yesterday. This fridge is wild. What are the proportions of anything in this fridge? Do you see? Everything looks enormous to me. What is the size of that Parm bottle on the top? Is this an Italian fridge? There's like an enormous thing of feta, next to an enormous thing of spaghetti sauce, little cherry tomatoes, some pasta. It's really just a thing to behold. So I don't know. You're welcome. You're welcome. So if this is your fridge, congrats. Everything's looking delicious. You don't need to buy any Parmesan. Okay, so before you go, let's get back to the metaphor. Before you make a grocery list, you look in the fridge, you see what you have, and then you put the things on your list. You can prioritize things based on their status, their condition. Same with your content. I don't know, maybe it's more exciting than a grocery list. We recommend a content inventory for this. Content inventory is just a document of all the content on your site, typically page by page, pages on your site. This is a quantitative tool. It can look as simple as this. If we're doing one at Pixo, it can get a lot more complex, but at its heart, it's just this. You go through your whole site, page by page. If that makes you freak out, I'm going to give some tips in a little while for how to make that more scalable. But essentially, you go through your site page by page and you record just what's there. I've also made Marie Kondo comparisons when talking about this. If you want to go through all your clothes and get rid of some, you need to make your big pile of clothes first and go, well, I have a lot of clothes, before you can decide what to keep and what to toss and what sparks joy. So for each page, I'm going to use the Dance at Illinois site as the example here because frankly, we worked on this site and it's beautiful. So for instance, if I were starting a content inventory for the Department of Dance website, I would start on the homepage. You look at each page, look at the title of the page, the URL of the page, and then scroll to see what content just seems to be prioritized on this page and fill it in on your spreadsheet. The title is Dance at Illinois. This is the URL. And on the homepage, there's a strong visual message. You can go to dance.illinois.edu if you don't believe me. There's a strong visual message. There's mission text. There's previews of news and events. And then you repeat this structure for each page, or you repeat this process, for each page following the menu structure. So for instance, I'm going across the top menu, the top navigation here. Programs and applying is the first section. So I would start with the programs and applying page, and then just go down the list. Why Dance at Illinois, undergraduate programs, graduate programs, etc. So what are you really doing while you're filling out a content inventory? You're skimming each page. This is not a deep dive. This is not an exhaustive process because you will exhaust yourself in turn. Just in general, what's on this page? What seems important on this page? You're documenting how much content there is. This is sort of the Marie Kondo approach of, wow, I didn't know we had, this many pages on our site. What are we doing? We need to clean this up. Or I don't know, maybe it's happened that people have been like, wow, our site is surprisingly efficient and everything here is important. Documenting what type of content is prioritized, that's where that notes column comes in. You're saying, okay, these messages are really getting pushed, or this type of information comes through a lot on our site, for better or worse. Does that match our mission and what we're trying to convey to people? And you can also be capturing ideas for potential later changes. I would say if you're new to this, you've never done this before, and you're doing a content inventory, sort of a high level skim like I'm recommending, you don't try to go too deep on, well, maybe we need this, maybe we need this, but make notes if anything is obviously out of date or obviously wrong. And we'll talk about quality of content in just 1 second. Well, we'll talk about quality of content on this slide. So an inventory, I'm just going to scroll back because I feel like I only showed this once. An inventory is a quantitative review. You're just looking at how much content you have, where, you can see sort of where things might get bloated, and what kind of messages and content is prioritized on the site, what comes up a lot. So step 2 of seeing the quality of assessing your current content on your site is looking at the quality through an audit. Such a fun, exciting, sparkly word, audit. Then you audit the content on your site, reviewing the quality of the content. Lindsey, how do we do that? Well, you just take the spreadsheet or the tool that you just made for the inventory. We use really simple Google Sheets. You just add some columns. So the inventory is step 1. Add some columns for a qualitative review for step 2 for the audit. So with clients at Pixo, we like to use another absolutely terrible acronym, a ROT audit. I'm so sorry. A ROT audit to standardize what you're looking for when we say quality, because otherwise it can be totally subjective. Like if you're working with a group of people and you're like, okay, can you assess the quality of this? And they'll be like, I really like the blue on this page. We don't care if you like the blue on the page, respectfully. We're looking for specific things. And so if you can have this sort of structures in place that you're all following, or that at least you know how to follow, then it's easier to not get caught up in little details and what people like or what they don't like. So when we say quality, we mean, unfortunately, ROT. ROT stands for redundant, outdated, and trivial. So I recommend adding a column for each of those to your inventory, adding perhaps a to-do column associated with those. And let's talk about what these mean. Redundant, outdated, trivial. Redundant means this topic is covered elsewhere on this site. So like we have, 6 pages and they each have 1 paragraph of text about essentially the same topic. It's redundant. Can we get rid of some of these, or can we consolidate some of these pages with other content to make it more juicy? Outdated, probably self-explanatory, but is there timely content that needs to be updated, rewritten, or deleted to be relevant to our site visitors? Pages with lots of dates, deadlines, pages that call out specific people who may have left your organization. In general, the more specific information there is about dates and people, the more high risk it is to be outdated. So keep an eye out for outdated content. And trivial. You ideally have already spent some time thinking about what your audiences want and what your goals are and how the website can support those. And there probably is content on your site that just doesn't speak to either of these. It's like, who is this for? Who cares about this? This meets no goals, and we can probably get rid of it. So based on that review, we had the to-do column earlier. Based on that review, you can start to think about making informed decisions to improve that content that you already have. Maybe it's good to go. That happens. It speaks to audience and organizational goals. The topic isn't spread out over a bunch of pages for no reason. It's up to date. It sounds like us. It might need some edits, some changes, or some consolidation, totally normal. Or we can delete this or archive this. This is secretly the best. This is secretly the best option. If the more information, the more content, the more pages there are on a website, the larger the cognitive load for anyone who's coming to your website to find something. So if you're like, I'm not sure we need this, it's great. You can archive it. I give you permission. Please do it, in fact. So this is just an sample of what this could look like, these few pages after a ROT audit. This is not true. If anyone's here from Danson, Illinois, this is not true. I'm making this up. Your site, of course, is perfect. But let's just say, for the sake of example, use check marks for the redundant, outdated, trivial, the ROT. They can be all three also. It doesn't just have to be one or two. They could be all three. And then make specific to-dos. Just make a note about what about that content is redundant, outdated, trivial, or what needs to happen. If you think you'll remember later, you won't. So while you're going through it, or while you're delegating other people going through it, recommend that they do that all in one move. So for instance, if something is outdated, let's say, okay, these dates need to be updated. We revised our mission statement. Let's update that. This page is trivial. No one is, it doesn't need to be its own page. We can consolidate that with similar content. And congrats, undergraduate programs is up to date and feels like us. If this sounds very scary, I don't blame you. It can be a little scary. I'm talking about, this can be pretty rote. Like I said, it can be painstaking. And if you have a large site, it's an elephant that I'm asking you to eat. And I know that you probably don't have time for this. No one has time for this. We work with clients every day who don't have time for this, who are doing this on top of their everyday jobs that they already have to get done. But it can be done. And I believe that it can be done because it's so scalable. So some ways to scale this kind of work are to start with a high priority section only, based on the work that you've done thinking about audiences. What do people need? Just pick one section of the site and go, okay, we're just going to tackle this and do this as an example first. Delegate if you can. Form, like I said, a team of subject matter experts or people who know about the content on the site or who work with your audiences regularly if you can. Great, even greater if they care about the website, and delegate sections out. Meet with that group regularly if you can. Set deadlines. But just remember, it's okay to start small. It's okay to start very small. It's okay to do one section and set it aside for a while and then, revisit every once in a while. You don't have to eat the entire elephant at once. It just won't get done if you try to put too much pressure on yourself. So I give you permission to proceed slowly.
Lindsey, I'm going to gracefully interrupt you.
Please, that was so graceful.
Yes, got
She's
in.
beauty. She's grace.
A question in the chat.
Yes.
I am assuming that you're talking about all these content audits to make on a site that has already been built. Someone in the chat said, I'm currently working on my website. How would I apply this info you're giving us what we have planned for the site? So as you're going from the ground up, how would you apply these principles?
Okay, great question. I think so. The inventory would not be relevant to you, obviously, because you don't have a site to go through and inventory. But I feel like we can kind of reverse the concept. And I'm going to go back on my slides, even though there's not really that much to see about the inventory. I'm so sorry. So instead of doing an inventory document where you're documenting everything you have because you don't have anything yet, you can flip this and make what we would call a content plan with the same type of information, I would say. So what pages do the same exercise with the audiences, except it's, I guess I'm guessing all, hypothetical at this point, but who are we trying to reach? Who would we like to reach with our site? And what kind of information are they going to be looking for from us? And what kind of information can we convey to them that will help further our organizational goals, whatever they are? And then create a content plan that documents what pages you would like to create and the notes about what kind of content belongs on those pages. This might sound super simple, I'm not sure, but I think it's really easy to just sort of freehand it and be like, I'll just make it up as I go. And then, things get crazy. And then you're in a point where your site's bloated and you don't know what's going on. So just going in with even a very simple plan of, we want to create these pages, these sections, and each page will have this type of content prioritized on it. Any forethought before you just start building the site, or as you're building the site, is helpful, because most people don't do that, to be honest. This is like a whole topic. I'm sort of restraining myself from like really going a lot deeper on this, because this could be a whole other hour-long webinar, planning your site before you launch it. But also, not to be corny, but congratulations. Wow, a new site is about to be born into the world.
And Jolene, I will say, and for anyone else who might find these relevant, we do have some resources like Plan Before You Build worksheets that we can send along with the resources after this. Not to, shoehorn another Pixonauts expertise into Lindsey's beautiful webinar, but we've got some things we can send you.
We absolutely do. Yeah. That's a great thought, Jenna. Okay, yes, great question. Thank you, Jolene. Remember, this is like a montage of what we've been. Okay. Understand, my second, third, fourth, fifth recommendation for you is to understand why writing for the web is different. So I'm going to go through why writing for the web is different than other kinds of writing, what the conditions are that make it different, why you should care about writing for the web specifically, and then we'll go through tips and tricks for writing great content for the web. All right. There's a great book that I recommend to all of you called Content Design by Sarah Richards. Also might be Sarah Winters. She got married and I can't remember which one is the last name she uses now. But the book is great. And one quote I love from it is, if you respect your readers, you will make the content work for them. I might love this because this is sort of another way to say the content is not for you, which I love to say. But it's just recognizing that and forming your content decisions accordingly around what your readers need, your site visitors need. I just love how simple this is. It shows respect to them. And when you show respect, it makes it easier for them to understand the content that you're trying to convey to them, find what they're looking for, and be pleased with their experience. So on the web, we're writing for readability. We write differently on the web because people read differently on the web. Nielsen-Norman Group has done many studies on eye tracking and how people read websites over the years. And this most recent, so this illustration is from an article that I'm quoting at the bottom that uses the Nielsen-Norman Group data, but they created this helpful illustration to show the common patterns that we use while we're looking at websites, while we're reading websites. So Nielsen-Norman Group did the same types of studies 20 years apart. And the most recent one was just within the last couple of years. And what they found is that, people don't read websites. They scan websites before they might start reading sections and really digging in, but we scan websites before we read. And when they did the same studies 2 decades apart, they found that the ways that we scan the web really haven't changed. All of the patterns that they found 20 years ago, we're still doing with our eyes when we're looking at websites. The only difference was that a few more patterns were introduced based on changes in web design trends and just different patterns of how we lay out content on the web. So it's still true, will I think forever be true, that people still scan content on websites digitally unless they are very motivated to read and learn the content. And fixation points, so you'll see, let me talk a little bit about what we're looking at here, I guess. The heat map version on the top left, the warmer colors are where someone's eyes lingered on the page. And so you can see, maybe we call the F pattern for a reason, or maybe like a weird little E, capital E. The warmer, the red colors are someone's eyes scanning that first line. There might be a heading up there. and they're saying, okay, what is this? And then the second line, they do it again, but there's a bigger skip toward the end. There's just scanning. They're scanning their eyes across the first couple lines thinking, is this what I'm looking for? Am I in the right place? Am I going to find what I need? And then they scan down the left side of the page. So the things that people fixate on, that we all fixate on when we're looking at digital content on the web, is headings. We look at those bigger, bolder words. Subheadings, I'm just taking this from the Nielsen Norman Group. So same concept, words, short phrases that stand out visually that summarize what you're about to read. Images and call to action buttons. So anything that's like subscribe, download now, sign up. Those are the things that our eyes gravitate toward. And when we're gravitating toward those things on the web, we are subconsciously, I don't remember the difference, unconsciously, subconsciously, we're looking for the information that we know we need. This is something we all do. People come to your site with a purpose. Okay, this is one of my favorite things to rant about. People don't come to your site unless you're a very special case. And if you are, I'm genuinely happy for you. People don't come to your site just to browse your site for fun and be like, wow, I love coming to this website. What a special experience it is coming to this website every day of my life. This is my favorite morning ritual with my coffee. They don't do that. They come to your site with a purpose, a question, a task they're trying to fulfill. And when we're scanning content on the web like this is us trying to find where our purpose meets your content. I'm looking for something, even if it's just ticking away in the back of my brain as I'm doing it. I'm scanning the content to see where I can find it, if I'm in the right place. We all do this. It's good. It's efficient. It also means that online people only read about 20 to 28% of what's on any given page. They do not, except in very special circumstances, scrutinize every word. They don't read it like a novel. They scan for those keywords. They're scanning the headings. They're looking for clues. And then they follow what we call the scent of information. Point being, you don't write content online for how you or your boss insists that it should read in print. You write content in a way that makes it scannable for web readers. Respect your visitors by making it easy for them to scan the content, because that's how we take in content online. We're also writing on the web for unpredictable screen sizes. One size does not fit all. Here's a stock photo of people using various, look at that tiny little phone that man in the middle has. Various screen sizes. People talk about the fold. The fold used to be a very important thing in web design. The fold is obviously a newspaper metaphor, and it's just not relevant anymore because the newspaper now comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You might be watching this webinar from the browser embedded in your refrigerator, and if you are, please speak up in the chat, because I do want to know that. We're writing for unpredictable circumstances, so this is just about accessibility. Accessible content is useful content, and useful content is accessible content. There's no one without the other. So I love this illustration from Microsoft Design Toolkit, which I think we'll share that link as well. The Microsoft Design Toolkit is just a useful resource for accessible web design and web content in general. But it just shows that accessibility needs can be permanent, they can be temporary, they can be situational. You know, closed captioning is technically an accessibility tool. I use it every day while I'm watching all of my shows, all of my housewives, etc. So hopefully we're all past thinking of accessibility as a nice to have, an add-on, or people who use assistive technology as a niche audience. Everyone can use accessibility tools. Accessibility is for everyone. It's very important. So we write for accessibility as well. And we also write for SEO, search engine optimization. And I will only, SEO is a heavy, complex topic, and I'm only going to talk about SEO in the way that content can affect it. When we get into, just here in a second, are the tips for writing for the web, how to do this. But in general, we scan content, Google scans content. The algorithm of Google is trying to mimic a human. It's trying to scan text like a human being. That's why it's so scary good at predicting what we want, because it's trying to be us, folks. It's trying to be us. I see. Shouldn't have opened the chat probably, but I'm looking at some chat. I'm going to go.
Oh, do you want me to gracefully interrupt you and read this question out loud?
Ungracefully do it. I don't care.
Okay, this is a good one. All right, and I've got a follow-up too. So how do you convince leadership? End of question. No, I'm just kidding. How do you convince leadership to devote the time, even at a small scale on a massive website, to do the inventory and audit, sharing data on high bounce rates on high priority pages where we don't want them, and low time on page doesn't seem to sway? As usual, lack of time and resources rules the day. Additionally, how much at this time do we need to be concerned about SGE, search generative experience? So maybe the first one first.
The first one first. This is like the question. This is the question. I feel like a form of this question has come up in every content strategy webinar. It's like, how do I convince my boss? And I just don't have, you would think I might be like, so I have the perfect answer. And it's just, there's really no great answer for this because it is the question. It's like the frustrating thing. How do I convince the people, who sort of rule what I do every day that this is worth doing? I don't know. I don't know is the big answer. I think if there's a chance for, when was the last time this was done? Do you get complaints about the website? Are there sort of internal, I'm thinking about reasons that people come to Pixo and say, we desperately need your help with our website. Like we've reached a breaking point. And it's always like, internal turmoil of authoring is just too hard. And it's affecting the way we can publish information on our site. We're missing opportunities. It's like we need a money angle here. Like we're missing opportunities to promote this thing as well as we could be. I wonder if the thing that's hardest about this, I think, is trying to say, okay, how do you find the time to even gather the evidence for this if leadership does not agree that it's a problem? And I really don't know the answer to that. The things that are coming to mind are all, here are things that you could do to present to leadership, but they're all like gathering some data. We're going to talk really quickly about usability testing at the end of the talk, getting actual proof recordings of people going through your site and being like, I don't get what this is. So being able to prove that you're missing opportunities to be connecting with people and therefore making money, getting people to sign up, whatever your goals are. I just simply don't have a good answer for this, and I really wish I did. Yeah, I was going to say, if anyone else in here, if anyone else can speak up in the chat, and yes, thank you, Carrie. Yeah. Put yourself in their shoes. Glorious advice, no matter what we're talking about. And also, I will be totally honest, I don't know anything about SGE. I am but a humble content strategist. I'm but a simple, unfrozen content strategist. I don't know anything about SGE. And I can really only speak to SEO, like I said, in the way that like good content affects it positively. So if anyone else here knows anything about SGE, please speak up. But sadly, I'm not your girl. I'm sorry. I wish I were. How'd I do, Jenna?
I was just going to unmute myself and tell you that you're doing great.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right. I'm going to keep chewing on that. I wish I had a better answer for how do we convince the folks. No, do not apologize for the tough questions. I'm not afraid of the tough questions. I'm not afraid, again, as a content strategist or maybe just a fool bouncing through the world, to be like, I don't know. I just don't know. I wish I did. The most I can give you is like camaraderie. Like, this is just hard. It's hard. You're asking how to do a really hard thing. So sorry, it's so hard. All right. How do you write readable content for site visitors? So we're going to speak to all the concerns that I just went through, all the reasons it's different writing content for the web. So how do you actually do it? Luckily, The concepts are pretty straightforward, pretty simple. To improve your content's readability, be brief as you can, be clear as you can, and use visual structure. These are sort of the tenets. These are the basics. What do I mean by be brief? Cut it out. Cut it. Write no more. Remember that stat from earlier about how people only read like 28% of what's on a page? That means the more text you have on a page, the harder it is for them to find what they're looking for, the harder it is for them to scan. So the first thing you can do to just make it easier is just to cut anything that's really unnecessary. Write no more than 50% of the text you would have used in a hard copy, ideally less because of that 20 to 28%. Cut it. Make it a poem, not a novel. And let it breathe. So white space, we hear a lot, I'm gonna be honest, from clients about when we design certain pages or maybe we create an example page for them and they're like, ooh, so much white space, and not in a good way. But our eyes, because they're scanning the content on a page, love white space. So I'll just put that out there. White space, good. When we're talking about text content and informational content on the web, try to keep your paragraphs short, around 1 to 5 sentences, and use white space to your advantage. It just makes it easier for our eyes and also for assistive technology to scan the page and figure out what's there and get our bearings. Be clear. Structure your message. So if you recall the heat map showing someone's eyes, they're scanning more thoroughly the first line of the page or the first lines of paragraphs using that F-shaped structure. Try to use important words, your subject words, your topic sentence in the first sentence of each paragraph. I'm going to say this again later, but it's like sometimes, I know this better than most people, I would say. Sometimes the effort or the pull to be clever or really cute when you're writing content and like put a little clever pun in there is so strong. Really try not to do that. If you're getting across important information that people need to know, get to the point, use those keywords, your subject words in the first sentence of each paragraph, just so our brains understand I'm in the right place. I should keep scanning or keep reading. Test the readability of your content. 8th grade readability is the average reading level in the US. So readability is huge. I'm going to share a tool to test the readability. If you've ever been to a webinar that I've hosted, you've seen me promote this tool. But when we think about our content internally ourselves, whether you're higher ed, whether you're a regular old business, you're trying to sell something, we use jargon all the time. We're very inside baseball, which is kind of an inside baseball phrase itself. We're full of jargon. We're full of acronyms. Everyone does this. That is really tough for folks. It's really bad for readability. So you being able to use a tool that's objective, put your writing through a tool that will assess that readability and sort of point out things that make it harder for people to actually read and understand what you're saying. Very helpful. And use headings. We already learned from Nielsen Norman Group how important headings are. Headings communicate what you're looking at on the page, what you'll find here, the organization of the content. Our eyes love them, our assistive technologies love them. They're big, they're bold, they're beautiful headings. Use your headings well. When I say readability, make your content more readable, essentially what that means is just reduce your long sentences and your words to keep the text simple and easy to read. It's just worth hitting twice. We love readability. Good writing for the web is good editing. Editing. Hemingway app is the tool. Yesterday, while going through these slides again, I was suddenly struck with a panic that what if Hemingway app had been taken down? I don't know why it would ever. I would donate to a GoFundMe if it ever needed funding. Hemingwayapp.com is just a word processor. I'm 100. It's a web app. It's very lightweight. It works like a word processor. If you literally know what that is, it grades the readability of your content and gives you tips to simplify. You can't save files in it, anything like that. It's just an editor, but you can see in the screenshot here, the examples. It will give you the readability by grade and give you tips to simplify. Take them, leave them. We love Hemingway app. The theme of this slide is use visual structure. So using visual structure in your content has the same effect as what we're talking about headings, why headings are so important. White space, these types of things make content easier to scan on the web. So use heading levels. What that means is nest your headings by rank, meaning if you have a H1, it's usually the biggest and boldest, information. If you have information that's like a sub heading of that, you use an H2 heading, et cetera, et cetera. If you use anything like, Google Docs to format, probably any word processing tool. At this point, I'm sure that's second nature. Assistive tech uses headings for in-page navigation. As I keep hitting on, so do our eyes and our brains. Use bulleted lists where possible. We love bulleted lists. Our brains love them. Our eyes love them. Walls of text are the enemy, just big blocks of text, long blocks of text. Bulleted lists just add a little bit of that white space we're talking about, some visual structure. They give you, and they add cues for assistive tech and search engines as well. Say what is on this page. Meaningful alt text. Alt text used to be kind of alt, like people didn't really know about alt text. Now it's a feature on Instagram, so I feel like I don't need to really explain what it is as much anymore. It is alternative text to an image. So if for many and any reasons, someone cannot, see or load the image that you want them to be looking at, they will see or read or hear the alt text instead. Rules of thumb are you don't need to say an image of blank, 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 knows it's an image. And think of describing the image to someone over the phone. Think about the context of the image, what's important about the image. You do not need to, this is not something that you need to be exhaustive about if you have a good system in place for alt text. It's non-negotiable and well worth it. And I already said this, it's worth saying again, use your keywords in headings. Choose clarity over cleverness. I'm so sorry, but really just say what the topic is and be as specific as possible. That really helps your site visitors follow that scent of information I mentioned earlier. We love that. To emphasize how important visual structure is, I have the information on this slide on a different slide that has no visual structure. So this is more of a wall of text. This bad, we don't like this, boo, this slide. And so just think, you're probably sold on this. I don't think this is that controversial to say visual structure is helpful. But if I had you scan this slide for a few seconds and say, okay, did you find what you need? You would say, Lindsey, that is too difficult. Whereas this type of content is much easier to scan and take in. Wall of text bad, visual structure good. Another tool I recommend to anyone who's trying to do this themselves, and God bless you, have I mentioned, if you're trying to do this yourself, it's not easy, is checklist.design. I think one of our engineers came up with this recommendation, but it's great for writing web content as well. It's just a list of content, a list of checklists for testing all sorts of elements that are web related. If you say, you can see on the example here, I'm writing a blog post, you open up the checklist, it gives you a list of possible things to think about before you publish. And there are accessibility checks on here as well. If you really feel like you don't know anything about accessibility, it takes you through a basic list of making your content accessible. And it's just a great catch-all for if you're not sure. We love a checklist. There's a blog post about checklists, maybe a webinar about checklists. We love checklists at Pixo. Oh, here's an example of an accessibility checklist. And finally, SEO, search engine optimization. How do we improve our SEO? How do we be found? How do we get found? How do people find us on the web? Clients ask us this semi-frequently, and it is my duty to give this absolutely unsexy, God-fearing answer as a content strategist. I say you publish well-structured, concise content. The robots are indeed trying to mimic us. Don't let them win, like Jenna said, but understand that they are trying to mimic the way that we look for information on the web. And this is how we find information on the web. So if you're in charge of the content, if you can only be in charge of one thing, please make it well-structured, concise, clear, following the tips I have been sharing with you. Okay, final topic. I know we're at 10:51. This isn't very long, and this is another topic that could be hours, but we could talk about this for hours. So all of this I know feels like a lot of pressure. And so one thing about just letting your website go wild and never thinking about any of this, the benefit is you never have to know when you're wrong. And that can rule. I love not knowing that I'm wrong. It can feel like a lot once you start to build an actual strategy and make decisions and make yourself beholden to doing the right thing. And that can feel like a lot of pressure. But the great news is you don't have to just inherently know or assume or guess what are the right decisions are to make. You can just try something and then you can test it. Okay. A lot of caveats here, especially given Aaron's question about how do I get the time and money to do this? However, I'm going to try and give an overview of usability testing. Usability testing is magical. It's actually not magical. It's actually extremely practical and common sense, but it's magical in its effects. So you don't need to know if it works for site visitors. You can guess, and then you can ask the site visitors. Here's how you do usability testing. Again, I am flying over the most basic of basic structure here, but in general, you write tasks, you meet with a person who needs your site or uses your site one-on-one. It could be virtual, could be in person. And you have them execute those tasks as best they can on your site. You watch and you take notes. We'll go through these. Writing tasks. So think of about 5 to 8 things that actions or information types that, given what you know about your website, given what you know about your audiences and your goals, you think this is really important. Someone has to be able to do this when they come to our site, or there is no purpose for our site. So these are different examples for different websites, but we really hope they can find the faculty directory. We're spending a lot of time pulling in these profiles. We want to know that they can find those profiles. For instance, we are a store and I want to make sure that someone can buy a winter hat on my online store. So can people shop for accessories on our site? Or we put a lot of resources into our newsletter. Is anyone even subscribing to the newsletter? Is it easy to subscribe to the newsletter? 3 examples of tasks. However, these are the tasks that as they relate to the website. So this is a little bit more of an advanced tip, but I really think it's worth it. Remember that websites are powerful because they help people find information, make decisions. Your people don't go to your website because they're thinking, I really want to look at a faculty directory today. They come to your website because they're thinking, I need to find out who studies the thing that I am interested in studying. I need to find out how to contact this certain person, right? So there's a real world context versus your website context. So the tasks that you write for usability testing are better with real life context, just a little story. So add some context. So instead of find the faculty directory, just say the task is you need contact information for a professor. Where might you look for that? Instead of where you can shop for accessories, you need to buy mittens. Where might you go on this website to do that? You want to get email updates from us. How would you sign up for those? The other benefit of writing tasks with real life context is that they're less leading. If you just say, hey, where's the faculty directory, do you think? And you have a menu item that says faculty directory, they're going to be like, right there. So make sure that people are making connections between their real life needs and your site. So you write those tasks of what 5 to 8 things that are important for testing your site, things people should be able to do. You meet with a person one-on-one. This is not a focus group, ideally, one-on-one. Share the site. If you only have a wireframe, you only have a design, that's cool too. They can point, they can just talk you through it and take you through it. We've done usability testing like this with paper prototypes before at Pixo. Sorry, make sure I'm saying everything I want to say. Use the most realistic content you have if you're using a not live site, but share the site with them. Say, okay, open this on your browser. Can you share your screen if you're doing it virtually? And go through the tasks one by one and just let the tester navigate. You say, okay, you are looking for contact information for a professor. Where might you look for that? And then just watch what they do and take notes. While the person is executing these tasks, ask them to think out loud as much as possible. So if they're sort of struggling, say, what are you looking for here? Tell me what's going through your mind. Ask clarifying questions, not leading questions. Don't say like, if I were looking for a profile, I might be looking in the top right. That doesn't help you. well, it helps you, but it doesn't help the problem. And make it really clear that you're testing the site or whatever, your content, not the person. We always say at the beginning of a usability test, you can't do anything wrong here. There's nothing you can do in this test that will be wrong or that will get you a failing grade. The thing we're testing is the site. If you can't find something on the site, that's the site's problem, not your problem. And then based on what you're observing, you can share and prioritize. We have a full blog post about this. Yes, so Jenna just linked to a blog post by our colleague, Allison O'Fisher, in the chat. It is 10:56, so I'm gonna skip these for the most part, but in general, how you prioritize usability test insights and what you're observing during a usability test is how much does this frustration point, this thing that went wrong, the thing that people couldn't do, how much does it impact the users, the site visitors, their experience, and how much effort will it take for us to solve it? The more it impacts people and the easier it is for you to fix. Like if this is just a question of the label is a little confusing for this section, we should think of a clearer label for this content. That's easy to do, relatively. You can do it. And so prioritize based on that. But the blog post that Jenna just linked by Allie goes into great detail about this. And I believe also has a download for actual prioritizing of usability test insights. If you absolutely cannot do this, there are also real life ways to figure out if your site is working. Connecting with people, talking to the people who interact with your site visitors in real life, IRL, as we say. Do they have calls or questions decreased? Just some common sense, do people ask the same things? Do they call us and say, I can't find this information? Or they call us for information that we know is on the website. There are real life signs that your site is working as well. In summary, please remember, in the end, this is just a website. And I always say, unless anyone here is coming to us and they're like, yeah, I'm actually in charge of the emergency room page on our local hospital. Okay, that's literally life or death. Most websites are not life or death. They can be high stakes. I'm not trivializing that. And I believe, I'll cut my rant short about how much I actually do believe in great content and how it can change people's lives, because people do use it to make decisions about their real lives every day, all the time. But most websites are not life or death. A website is a series of decisions and trade-offs. What might work for someone else might not work for you, might not work for your site visitors. So make decisions about what you know about your site visitors. Don't worry too much about what other people are doing. And a website is living. It's bits, it's bytes, it's pixels. It's not done. And we love that, actually. That's great. That's good. We love it. So just focus on doing the most high priority things you can, if anything, first. Let it live, test it if you can, adjust it if needed, repeat that forever. Just take it incrementally. Wow, it's 10:59. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much. I love to talk about this and we love to do this. Yes, thank you, Carrie, for propping us in the chat. I can't see at all how you might have a personal stake in Pixo's success. But thank you. Thank you all for being here. We have a website, we have a blog full of helpful blog articles. And thank you. Now I feel spent. I appreciate
Lindsey's
you all
done
being
for
here.
the day.
Yeah, Lindsey is done for the day. It's true.
I do want to remind everyone real quick, you will get a follow-up email today. So I know that's a lot of great information. You may feel overwhelmed possibly, but you can go back and revisit that. I'll share all of the resources that the Pixo team has too. And like they shared, there's always a ton of resources on their website. So to venture into this topic and others, please feel free to check out their site, and I'll make sure to include that in that follow-up email.
Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, of course. All right, well, it does look like that Jenna caught up on all the questions. So thank you so much, Jenna, for that. And thank you, Lindsey, for presenting. Thank you to everyone who joined us. We really appreciate it. We do have another session with Pixo next month, so feel free to check out that as well. Sorry, Jenna, you caught me off guard with your...
I'm saying, come back
Yes,
and see
yes,
us.
please join us. But once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Please stay safe with the weather that's supposed to be coming, and we look forward to seeing you in another session.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.